Let's get started. Call the meeting to order. This is Finance Committee, Town of Raleigh meeting for March 5th, and it's 7:20. Call the meeting to order. And the first item is reviewing some of the budgets. First one is Town Moderator.
Make a motion to approve the town moderator's budget.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have my...
That's the big one, huh?
Yeah. It's that one out of the way.
That never changes. No, I take that back. One year when we had to cut everything, we took like $2 off from that one.
Okay, any other discussion on it? $100 item. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, town moderator budget is approved. Next one, town council.
I just had a question when I looked at that. It's the same as last year as fiscal year 19, but if you go back like 4 years, it was less than half of what it is now. Is there a reason why that became the new norm where it's so high? It went like 56 to 71 to 68, 114 and 114 again. So that seems like to be the new norm. Do we have a lot of legal issues in the town?
No,
that
we have
justify-
budgeted that amount for, I'd say, almost 10 years or
10
so
years,
at
yeah.
least. So some years, there's greater utilization if the planning board has zoning articles, special permits that require legal assistance, union negotiations, labor issues. So the professional services line is available to any town department that, if they come to me and I understand what the issues are, development of bylaws and things like that. That's what the professional line is. The litigation is more of to protect the town if the town is sued and we have to defend the town. And if it's something that doesn't come under our insurance policy. So those are the reasons. So it's a utilization, and we're in negotiations now with 3 union contracts. So you'll see a spike every 3 years or so. Some might take longer. So that's, it's cyclical, but it's also tied to if the Conservation Commission has a lot of things, land acquisitions and things like that, or the planning board has zoning bylaws, or they have special permits that need legal review. Sometimes people present their attorneys at hearings on behalf of their applicants, and we need to have an attorney review what's submitted by an attorney.
Okay.
To protect the town in that particular board, to ensure that we have an attorney reviewing what an attorney would be submitting to the town.
Okay.
What made the litigation jump from 8 to 62 in 1 year?
That was what was actually spent out of $62,000.
See, what they appropriated is different from what they actually used each year. You're looking at like 16, 17, 18. That's what we actually spent, not what we appropriated.
Out of $114,600.
Oh, okay, like 19, I just noticed
That
that,
wasn't
yeah.
the
Right.
budget,
It's
that's it.
appropriated, that one
Right.
doesn't say actual, okay, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Right.
The others were what was actually spent
Yeah,
out
this
of
is
that
actual,
budget.
yeah, okay, that's fine.
And it's one of those budgets that you can't predict.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we,
Well, I mean, that's a huge appropriation from 10, 8 to 62. We anticipating problems?
Level funding, what has been appropriated historically for about 10 years.
Yeah.
So it depends on what case might come about, or some litigation matter, or something's been appealed. We had one case that took 19 years in land court. So we might not have any activity by the town's attorney, but then all of a sudden we have a spike when filings have to be made and things like that happen. So it's hard to say, but it's just to protect the town. If we don't use it, we don't use it. It goes into the general fund and comes out as free cash.
yeah,
Yes, like last
On a-
night, they had the selectmen's meeting, some zoning questions that have to go to the town council and things like that. We might be buying that Didax building, which of course would have to get reviewed, so there's just, it's very much an unknown. Okay, I do have a motion to approve the town council.
that we approve it.
Okay,
I'll second it.
second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Town council budget is approved. Next one is town hall. Okay. Any questions on the town hall?
No,
You have a motion to accept the town hall?
I'll make a motion.
Before we get to that, why are we paying electric bills at the town hall and the town annex when we're funding the electric company? Can we get a
We're still a
rebate?
customer. They still have to charge us legally. They do waive, have been waiving the street light cost,
Mhm.
but we're a customer with the water and the electricity.
I know, I was thinking, can't we negotiate a rate
Special rate
abatement?
for the town? Well, I'll leave that to you to go to the municipal light board.
Okay, have a motion to accept town hall. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any other discussion?
Larry, yeah, as a matter of fact, I noticed this in several of the budgets, and I'm just asking the question, bottled water, like.
That's the water cooler out here.
Okay, okay, I was
It's
wondering.
gone up a little bit, a couple $100. Poland Springs was bought out by Refresh, and,
That led to a question though, why don't we have like a water cooler instead? Would that be cheaper, like year to year,
well, that is like that water cooler out there.
rather than bringing in jugs like they have in?
You mean like a bubbler?
A bubbler to drink? I'm just saying, I don't use bottled water at home. We have the water treatment plant, and we find that the
Yeah.
water is fine, at least on Weathersfield Street. And I'm wondering why these various departments are all buying all this bottled water.
Which just one for here and one for the annex. They can probably use the faucet in the restroom if they want to.
Oh, I
That's
wasn't
my
implying that, I didn't know.
No, there's only one,
But
There's
some
only
people
one.
don't like the Raleigh water. I know one
If-
selectman
yeah,
that
that's-
absolutely refuses.
And it's like, there's like a big jump in both of them. It's not like it's a
Yeah,
lot of money, but I'm
yeah.
just asking the question.
we've, since I've been working here, they've always had a water
Set up.
cooler here for people to drink the water.
Okay.
We do only have the bathroom sink.
Right,
if
no, that's why I
people
was
wanna
thinking
fill
in
up
terms of like a
jugs.
bubbler or a water cooler.
Yeah, a
But-
bubbler machine.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be afraid of the germs on that, but one thing we do have to now is get the water cooler system cleaned and disinfected
Yeah,
now, and that's part of this cost.
yeah. Okay, I'm just
But
asking.
if, if that's an excessive expense, we can certainly look at it and
I was just
talk about-
wondering.
Do we own
versus
the
a-
equipment or we rent the whole thing?
No, it's part of the contract, like when you purchase it, they come in and clean it.
Okay.
The company that bought out Poland Springs, it's called Refresh now, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, so we did have a little spike in that expense line.
Okay, any other questions, concerns? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Town hall budget is approved.
I guess I did.
Right. Town hall annex. We'll continue on, we've got another minute.
I'll make a motion to approve town hall annex.
Have a motion to approve, do I have
I'll
a second?
second it.
Any other discussion on the town hall annex budget?
We have $1,200 worth of trash collection and $1,200 on town hall too. Is there a savings? I mean, it's only across the street. Are we paying the same for both?
I'm sorry, the trash, so we
Trash.
have a company come and take the trash away.
Yeah.
We have a janitor who works about 14 hours a week in his own vehicle, so he doesn't take the trash away. We have no way.
No, I understand, it's just it's $1,200 for the annex and $1,200 for the town hall and they're 100 yards apart.
No, they
Well,
are.
no,
No, it's the same
No.
company.
But the annex is down on Central Street.
Yeah, that's where the COA is.
Yeah,
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 well,
they're
or
not
the
just a
cross-
couple of feet apart.
Well,
It's like, they come and pick up the trash at my house and your house, it wouldn't be the same price. I mean, you know, to one group.
We have different amount of trash, because the senior center has a lot of food
Right.
products and trash waste that are related to food. There might be a little bit more sometimes over there, but we do, we have a company come in and we have to pay prevailing wage for trash pickup. That's a state law, so we do have a company that takes the trash for us.
okay, any other concerns, questions?
Well, the number, I don't know, it doesn't, not that much of a difference, but 10% of 17,518 would be $1,752, so that's 1682. It's not really 10%, it's a fraction, it's probably like 9.6, I don't know if you round it up or whatever, you know.
Right, but I mean,
So-
that's, we go by the differences in the numbers, not necessarily the percentage.
Well, I'm just looking at the percentage is really not accurate, that's all.
Right.
Um,
Any other comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the town hall annex, signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, the annex is approved. On to the,
Really 9.6 if it matters.
okay. Cemetery,
Board Cemetery Commission,
okay,
and looking at our budget, we level funded the expenses. There's a slight increase in wages due to the fact that our employee is getting a 1/5 increase. The rest of his salary increase will be by the union contract, which is under negotiation. We also increased we have 2 part-time summer help that have been working 10 weeks. We are increasing the 10 weeks to 12 weeks to help with the cemetery in the summertime, so they're gonna work 12 weeks at 20 hours a week instead of 10 weeks. And they get a slight increase in pay also from,
Because minimum wage went up, so was everything's,
the what?
I said, because minimum wage has gone up, everything is.
Yeah, they've gone in the new pay scale that we have, as well as the big one is the increase in weeks, each one's getting 2 additional weeks. Give us help in the cemetery,
And we need it.
we need it.
okay, any other questions, concerns? I have a motion to accept cemetery.
I'll make a motion that we accept the cemetery budget.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Cemetery is approved. Braid Street and Dodge properties.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Oops. Left out the Memorial Day. Well, we'll get
We
that
can get
next.
that.
Braid Street properties, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Where is that one now?
I'll second that.
Okay. That's,
I don't know if I can.
They've combined them together in one line item and reduced the amount of money.
Okay.
I think we've got Memorial Day and Veterans left.
right. First have to get, any other questions on,
What is this, like
Right.
maintenance costs or something?
Basically for emergencies, if we have there's issues with either property we're responsible for, that gives us money that's available. We
Memorial.
don't spend it, we turn it back into cash at the end of the year.
We're on Veterans Day, yeah, and that's level funded.
Any other questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved. Memorial Day, Veterans Day.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on Memorial Day, Veterans Day budget? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, Dodge Reservation expense.
We just did that.
We just did that, that's
Did I?
combined. Yeah,
Combined,
they
no.
combined.
Right, sorry about that. Speaking before I'm thinking. Okay, that's it for
Budgets.
the budgets. Item 3 is appointment with Triton Superintendent and School Committee.
Just so you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
See you next week.
Yes. Can't wait, huh?
Yeah, yeah. You wanna go ask them to come in? No, we're ready. Thank you, Peter. You're the one that can get out.
Hi, just one question. Do you guys publish these budgets? Are there copies in here?
No, we don't.
Okay.
The summaries are typically in the annual report, not the details and things like that.
Where'd you guys like us?
Wherever you're comfortable.
Visitors seats or the front
So
seats?
wherever you're
Yeah, front
comfortable.
seats.
Good evening.
Where are you all?
Okay, just for the record, because, we attend a lot of school meetings and stuff like that. Brian, you kind of work for the school committee, right?
Not kind of.
He does.
Physically, yes. So,
I was being kind.
thanks, I
but-
appreciate that, Larry. Yes, so the school
Because
committee
there are times
hires.
when it looks like, they work for you, so I just.
No, I'm not.
I am not going to acknowledge or comment on that. Thanks for setting that up, Larry.
I remind him frequently
Yes,
that
yes.
we're his boss.
Yes. So the school committee's roles are hiring and firing the superintendent, setting policy, and setting the budget. So
Okay.
yes, I have 9 bosses.
And then the school committee is elected by the 3 towns.
Yes.
So basically, your boss is the 3 towns.
Constituents, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have 2 currently appointed members. So those seats will be up for a true election in May of this year.
Okay. I'm going to forego any comments right now and have the rest of everybody with their comments, and if they covered something that, or didn't cover something that I feel should be covered, I might at the end say something, but I'll open it up to the rest of the members.
No.
Okay.
Come on, Sharon.
I don't like that stare.
Well, I'll start it off then. For about the last 5 years, the Triton budget has consumed not only the 2.5 that was recommended and the new growth, but everything else, the remaining portion of that, and then some, to the detriment of the rest of the town. And I want to know what have you accomplished with that? We've given you kind of all of our money. What are we getting in return?
So what are you getting? You are getting a school system that is running, I would say, I hear the term in Raleigh, a lean, mean operation. I think if you look at staffing, class, student-to-teacher ratios, we are not running an exorbitant operation. I think there are certainly things that we would like to be doing. There are cuts that we've made every single year that we have not restored, and this current budget does not attempt to restore any of those. But we've maintained a quality education for our students, for the students that reside in Rowley, Newbury, and Salisbury. We have focused on maintaining class sizes. We've maintained programming. We've had to do away with things like late buses, and as other districts around the Commonwealth, we have to charge fees. Students pay $350 per sport to play at the high school level. I just came from Songus Arena, where Triton unfortunately lost to Boston Latin, but made it all the way to the division semifinals. So we've attempted to maintain quality programs, continue to be innovative. We have kept up current curriculum, math and science over the last 2 years. We know math, or STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is important. We've tried to maintain our programming there, implemented a new math and a new science curriculum over the last 4 years. Currently in the process of dealing with revised state frameworks for history and social studies, which includes, thankfully, kind of a resurgence of civics, which has had previously settled away from the regular curriculum. So we've maintained, we've kept abreast of the current technologies and the current curriculum, but by the same token, there's a lot of things we haven't been able to do. When I say we've kept abreast with current technologies, we have technology in classrooms. We're not where we need to be. I mean, there are many districts who have gone one-to-one. We don't have a one-to-one initiative. Students aren't handed laptops or iPads when they walk in the door, and hand them back when they graduate. So I feel like we've, over the last 3 years, so this is my third year as superintendent, we've focused on trying to develop a budget process that is more transparent, that there's literally not a dollar spent that you can't find in that 50, 60-page document that we produce. And so I feel like Triton provides a quality education for your students, and that's important. Are there things we would like to be doing? Absolutely. Do we need to do them? Need is a relative term, but there are certainly things, I don't want to speak for the committee, but there are certainly things that we've talked about that we haven't been able to do. And there are obviously, as we talk about each year, there are major cost drivers that continue to consume more and more of the budget, and that's been the challenge. So,
well, when you start to develop the budget, are there guidelines that you use or give to everybody? Like, one of the things every other department does is they receive guidelines from the Board of Selectmen. This is what we can afford. Plan accordingly, and that doesn't seem to happen between the Triton School and the towns themselves. Well, we'll say back in January 16th and 17th, when the presentations were made, they seem to be in a vacuum from the three towns. There was no input. The principals didn't come to the town and say, what can you afford? The school committee didn't come to the town and say, what can you afford? What's happening? And we get sticker shock of $1.72 million of a, well, this is the high water mark, that's fine, we've all drowned. But
so the principals will never come to the towns. I mean, that's not their
right, no,
position.
Yeah.
The other two towns, so Rowley had already given us a letter at that point. The other two towns had, at that point, either been in the middle of just completing their look at their revenues, or had just completed them, and we hadn't had a group district communications meeting yet. I watch all the all the meetings
Right.
to keep track of them. Rowley is, compared to Newbury and Salisbury at least, is well in advance in having those conversations.
Yeah, we start really early.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a request, I don't remember exactly when, but it was prior to one of the DCC meetings where the committee formally requested if there's something we can have in writing, and Raleigh responded, and Newbury and Salisbury chose not to. So there was discussion at the table, we think it's about this, but again, they're much further, I should say, back behind as far as the budget process. But just to clarify the process, so the 16th and 17th, it used to be 4 nights. It was Monday through Thursday, was whatever the dates were. And then it was trimmed back to 3 nights, and this year is trimmed back to 2 nights. So the process in Massachusetts is, what's called a school council. So the school committee is the authority within a school district. They hire and fire me, the superintendent, as the CEO. Within each school, the building principal has autonomy, obviously, to work within the confines of the district and budgets. But the school council is an important part of that process. So the school council is elected, their parents are elected by the PTA. There are faculty and staff that are elected from within. And they sit, there's a parent who's the co-chair with the principal. And that school council is an advisory council to the principal to make recommendations about how that school operates. So that school council develops what's called a SIP, or a school improvement plan. We kind of pulled the timing of those apart this year, but the school improvement plan is the document that by law has to be documented, developed to say, here are the priorities for our school. We believe as Pine Grove School, here's what we've said our priorities are. It has to fit within the district strategies that or the district goals and objectives we've set, but specifically for Pine Grove, this is what we would like to accomplish and what we need to accomplish or focus on to meet our students' needs. So that's the document that then drives the budget request. So in previous years, those 3 or 4, and this year 2 nights, it was an opportunity for the principals and co-chairs to present and say, here's what we believe the needs are for my school, Newbury Elementary, Pine Grove School, Salisbury Middle and High School. From there, we also then presented at a district level to say, here's what we know. We know salaries here. We know utility costs, medical costs. Those were also presented. The committee then took that and then set priorities to say, here are things that we say we absolutely must do. Here are things that we would really like to do. Here are things that's a pipe dream. So this year, if you go back and watch, we focused on a level services budget. So the only addition that we're making in this budget is, and it's not even official, but for the tentative budget, we moved some money that we had allocated for technology increases and upgrades into restoring late buses at the middle and high school campus 2 days per week, $33,000.
Right.
That's the only thing in this budget that isn't, there's a couple repairs, there's a couple maintenance repairs, bleachers at the high school, some things that are about to be written off as non-code compliant. So other than that, this is the cost.
There are also some other minor things, like the security cameras and,
No, those came out. Those are out this year. Those were in
Okay.
last year. Those are in the current budget. So there's a $50,000 deduct in fiscal
Okay.
20 because we spent that money. The cameras are operating. So that was a one-time spending. So there's a 50,000. Should be a parenthesis. Should be a minus 50,000 because that money came off. I mean, the drivers are salaries as they are every year, and then there's a line of $550,000 for special ed out of district placements. That is a handful of students that are very high cost. About 200 and change of that is actually being spent this year due to settlements, agreements, team meetings where we have an obligation to provide those services. And it's always very tenuous to talk about special education and in any way make it sound like we're not talking about whether or not these students deserve the services or need them. Had a discussion earlier today at the meeting in Newbury, just that public budget drop-in session, just about the cost of the medical costs, and we have nurses working with these students. These kids need and deserve these services. We as small towns are just drowning under the cost of providing them. So if you take the special education costs out, our budget, and including about 100,000 and change of in-district costs, our budget's at about 2.45% increase, which is not unreasonable. So that's this year, we're looking at a level services budget. So that we streamlined that to 2 nights because we still wanted the opportunity to hear from the principals, talk to the principals, what are the priorities, and then the second night focused on all of the kind of confirmed costs that we know about. The workshop had a very different flavor this year. It wasn't, okay, how do we want to categorize these expenditures? It was just simply, here, we can't. We would all love to. I certainly don't want to speak for the committee, but it's not for lack of intention or will. Everyone just understands that it's the reality that we're living within.
Plus, the reality is, you're working at, look at the reserve fund you have, which is like nil.
Yep.
For the type of budget that you have. If you have
Yep.
$300,000 for, what's this?
So we were certified at about 465.
65.
But
This year.
for this year, we were 299 last year. So we were certified at 465. Again, that's our free cash, excess and deficiency. We are in the process of putting together a proposal because we keep talking about the middle school, high school. It had needs the moment the project was done, but there are some capital needs at the building project. We need to assess that first, and there's some additional building access, swipe card access. So we will be proposing in April for the committee to spend $100,000 of that E&D this year to resolve those needs, and then we can move forward there. But that leaves us with $350,000 in reserves,
Yeah,
which
so
could literally be one student.
That's just says it all too, in terms of that you don't have this great amount of money that you have. I mean, the amount of money that you have for your excess and deficiency, what is that, like 2% or something? I mean, it's very small.
Less than
a
that,
percent.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's very small. For the,
Yeah, I mean, about 420,000 would be 1%.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
Let me jump
a
in
very
for a
small
minute.
amount. Of course.
I want to back up, Mr. White. So for those of you who may or may not know me, my name is Paul Lees. I'm on the school committee. I'm a Raleigh rep. One of the things that Brian left out in the very beginning, the question was, so for 5 years we've eaten up the new growth and the 2.5 and all that. And so one of the things I want to bring to everyone's attention is school choice. Okay, does everybody understand what school choice is? Okay, so school choice is students have the right, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not the professional, I'm just a school committee person, but students have the right to elect to go to other communities, okay? I've been on the school committee since 2010, and one of the things I'm most proud of, although I've gotten virtually nothing to do with it, is the fact that the culture at Triton has changed. When I got on the committee, there were a ton of people going out of the district, which means a lot of dollars flowed with those kids. And since Brian became an assistant superintendent, worked under Mr. Farmer, and then since he's been the superintendent, those numbers have completely changed. So now we're keeping students in district, and we're keeping those dollars in district. We're bringing more students in from other school districts, and I think that's incredibly important. I think everyone on the Finance Committee needs to understand that that's a change that's happened in the last 5 years, and all the administration, all the teachers at Triton should be very proud of that fact, because it's really been a change in culture.
In the graduating class, what's the breakdown of college, business, other?
Going into business, you mean?
Yeah, going into business, going
What's the
into
breakdown?
trades.
Across the board.
I don't have that off the top of my head. I want to say it's 80-ish% going off to 2 or 4 year college. And there's military, but I can get that information for you. Yeah, there's always a 4-year and a 5-year cohort. So the graduation rate is published as a 4-year cohort who did it in 4, and then a 5-year. Some kids needed that extra year, but I can absolutely get that data for you. Yeah.
So, but you're in the 80% range going off to college. Looking through, I mean, I don't see many Ivy League school graduates coming out. 4 in the last 8 years.
Yeah. So I would say this. So I started publishing 2 years ago. College acceptances rather than college graduations or where students are attending. Because I know a lot of students who have gotten into very prestigious colleges and have not been able to go there because of family situations. So there are those situations that kids are so bright, they're heading off and it doesn't matter, there's a full ride, no questions asked. But there are quite a few families, I mean, a very good number of families who have to make choices because college is just absolutely ridiculously expensive now. So in the annual report that was produced, we published all of the schools where students were accepted. But that was just this past year. That was 1 year's worth. So, would we like to see that higher? Absolutely, yeah.
And I think the
I would
reality.
just say you're providing a quality education. I just wondered what your metric was. That you're not too many going to the top schools here.
It's probably cost, though, is a big thing.
I can say it. I'm a Triton graduate. I was accepted at Radcliffe. I was accepted at Colby. I ended up going to the University of Texas at Dallas because I literally paid $6 a month in tuition.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reality. I mean, my parents, my dad worked here for the town. My mom was a teacher. We didn't have a ton of money. And I think I'm average. I think I'm, the
Yeah.
typical family in our communities,
I think there's been,
or at least in Raleigh.
I think there's also, excuse me, I think there's also been a big change. My daughter was a valedictorian at Triton a few years ago, I think in 2016. And so I've been through the process of college and applying to different places. And what you really need to understand is that the Ivy League schools and the top schools in this country, they give, what they charge is an arm and a leg, and what they give out is need-based. It's not academic-based. So you can have the most brilliant student at Triton's whose parents earn a decent amount of money. They're not going to get any academic credit or any academic reduction in the tuition. If they want to go to Harvard or Yale or Dartmouth, they're going to pay $60,000 or $65,000 a year. Those colleges thrive on students getting full tuition acceptance for need-based. Okay, kids from the inner city that are brilliant or likely as smart as the kids at Triton. Triton kids are not going to get those financial benefits. So what ends up happening is Triton kids end up going to lesser costly schools for financial reasons. So I want you to understand that years ago, these Ivies may have given academic scholarships. Those are gone. Those
I'm trying to
are
get a better understanding because Brian comes to all the town meetings each year and promises mediocrity. Mediocrity, basically. I don't want the best, don't want the worst. I want to be in the middle. And it seems like we're paying an awful lot of money for being in the middle.
I think it's about the teacher contracts that he's usually speaking about.
That comment has always been about cost.
Yeah.
For what we do provide for benefits to attract the best and brightest. Yes, that's never been, I don't want mediocrity in our product. I want us to provide the best product possible. Absolutely. 100%, absolutely, unequivocally. I think that we can do that by being middle of the road as far as what we pay. Because I think there are districts not too far away that pay very well, and it can be a very difficult place to work. There are places we know that don't pay a lot. So it certainly, when we're competitive with the Pentuckets and Newburyports, locally around us, we can attract quality educators, and that's what will make us great. It's not, I'd like to think a superintendent has an impact, a school committee has an impact, but it's the educators in classrooms that will make
I think the
us great.
Scores are more indicative than talking about what college you're going to be, and I think Triton is
We perform well. I mean, I think we have, so again, collectively, we are a 3-town region, so whether we're talking finances or other data and metrics, we're reported out as a collective entity. So we have a very diverse population across our 3 towns, of diverse student population and family population. So different priorities, different needs, and so that's reflective within the results and the data that we have on our student body as a whole. So I mean, I don't think that we would ever perform at a W's, the W's, because the level of expectation and funding and it's families, it's the entire communities and expectations. That's different, and that's not a bad thing from my perspective. We're having a career fair at the high school, which is there's a change. There's a big change in what we're expecting of students. College, no one will deny or debate the fact that a college education is important, but there are students who are not, and who have families who don't see that as a priority. And if they are geared towards the trades, let's help them be successful wherever it is in a career that they want to be. So, we've for so long pushed everyone into college. My wife works at the collegiate level, and you see students there who, by their second year, they're $70,000 in debt, and they don't know what they want to do, and they're going into crisis. So that's not helpful to put students in that situation. So I believe the measure of success is, are we producing students who are ready for that next step. If they're ready to be at Harvard, are they there? If they're ready to be at, at Northern Essex Community College for a couple of years, awesome, we have them prepared and they're there. Students who are going to go into a trade or into the military, they need the skills, the life skills, to take that next step. I forwarded to the leadership team today. There's an article in the Globe about a gentleman who took apart a Tesla. I think he's in the Salem, New Hampshire area, and he's opening a Tesla shop. He's the only person who has figured out, he bought a salvaged Tesla, and then he bought another one for parts, and he's putting it back together because Tesla says, no, only we can work on our cars. So this man has literally taught himself from stem to stern the technology in that car, and is going to create a business for himself, and is probably going to be very wealthy. And he's happy, he's enjoying what he's doing. So that's the type of thing we need to create in our students. Someone who goes out and says, you know what, at the end of the day, if someone says no to you, I'm not talking about breaking rules, but if someone says no to you, try again. Figure out another way to tackle the problem. And if we can build resilient, lifelong learners, that's success.
But we also don't want to have the point that the only reason why they're going to school is basketball or football or lacrosse or stuff like that.
So you're saying high school or to college?
Well, to high school, because then, they're going to go on to college. But, unless that's their career path. But if the only reason why they're going to Triton is sports, then I think the boat is being missed.
Although you can't discount the fact that people get these scholarships and that.
I'm not discounting it. No, I mean that's.
But that's what that helps. They get scholarships.
Yes, I realize that
when they're on the team. So.
But can you just explain what you mean? So if someone's going to Triton for sports, what do you mean?
Well, if they're there strictly for the sports, because Triton was division champion for 3 years in a row.
So someone's like choicing in, or because they live here?
Either one.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there too much emphasis on sport versus
I don't think
No.
so.
education?
I don't think so. Not
I
at all.
understand.
Disagree
just a
with that
sec.
completely.
Can I
So-
first, please? So I see the sports as the reason that they stay there,
Yeah.
not the reason that they go there. There are students that are inspired to stick with school because they have the team experience, because they enjoy that competitive, whatever it
But
is.
as long as
in
you're
that
teaching
sport.
them a career path or something like that, unless it's going to be strictly in sports. and
We
stuff
don't
like that,
have
but-
students coming out of Triton and going on to be professional athletes. That's not to say there isn't an occasional student who goes on
Right.
at the collegiate level, but I mean, we're a small
Because,
school.
yeah, I mean, I'm
I would love to have 1,500 students and compete
Right.
at that level, but that's not.
But
That's not Triton.
Larry, I have a grandson and a granddaughter that both came out of Triton. One was very active in sports, one was very active in music. And going and talking to the teachers and different things there, a lot of those students were high honor roll students doing it,
Yeah.
and they learned how to budget their time and work. And it was very, very important. In fact, my granddaughter has a banner in the gym for her track.
Yeah, every team this past fall, every team but one, and I'm going to forget the status. There's a status where if everyone on the team has a 3.0 or higher,
Yeah.
or whatever, 3.2 or higher, and it's like a gold or
Gold scholar, I think
gold
it's called.
scholar,
The
and that's an
scholar
MIA
athlete,
status. And so every single team this fall, except for one, and they were silver. So we are truly, I believe, the athletic director on his way back from Songus Arena with the ice hockey players, but he would tell you, we believe in scholar athletes.
Yeah.
There is no student who is at Triton to play sports. First of all, it's public high school, so they're there because they reside there, and they'll have to be, whether they like it or not.
They have to go to school.
Or they've choiced in. But, I mean, do we have students choice in for sports? Occasionally. We have students choice in for visual and performing arts? Occasionally. But that's not the wheelhouse. That's not our wheelhouse. And certainly academics is a priority. Can we be better? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Towards the academics and stuff like that, could you kind of explain the roles of the special needs people, the instructional assistants, the math specialists, special education professionals, those are all categories in everything, but I don't know where they fit in as far as
Absolutely. It's a good question.
teachers.
Yep, fair question. Did you want to make a point about something else before I?
I was just going to talk about the athletes, but so just to get in my piece about the whether or not students come to Triton to become athletes, knowing many of the coaches that are there are some communities closer to Boston where they learn about an incredible player here and an incredible player there, and they do what they can to bring those kids to their school district. That doesn't happen at Triton.
No.
It just doesn't. I can tell you that because I know the coaches, I know the players, the people that choice in here for the academics. We have solid athletic programs, but nobody that's a perennial year after year after year. With the exception of maybe cross country and track, where Mr. Colbert's done so well. But the bottom line is
Wrestling.
I think if you went back and looked at those, you're not going to see where the coaches are trying to bring kids in. That's not the way it runs. The athletic director, Mr. McGinnis, the only words he constantly uses are student athlete in just that order. And these every time a team does exceedingly well in something, they always highlight how many of those children have attained certain grade point averages. Not to mention, I don't know the specifics of the grade point averages, but you can't even be a student at Triton unless you're at a point. So if you're driving a C average or a C minus average, you're not going to play a varsity sport. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct.
But I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah.
If those grades don't come through, you're not playing.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're the best kid on the team.
Yeah. And that's, as I was standing there as they came off the ice tonight, Triton players came off, and then the Boston Latin. I mean, at least every athlete was a foot taller than our players. So, I mean, it's not, we don't attract, we're not a big D1 school. So students are not coming here for the athletics as a matter of rule. So one other thing on school choice that, to Paul's point before we move on from that. Since 2008, we've had a steady progression. In 2007, we had 273 students leaving the district and 113 coming into the district. So we're literally 2 to 1 out. Last year, we were about 140 in and about 55 out. This year, and I'm still digging into the meat of why, we've actually added about 30 students out of district. There are about 19 students that were here last year and have chosen to leave. I've emailed or mailed and spoken with several of those parents. They seem to be one-off situations. There's now the TECA online academy that parents can register their students at this virtual academy, and it's a public school, so it comes through school choice. They enroll their student. They say, the TECA says yes, we get a bill for $8,700. No discussion, no debate. So we have 12 students now at TECA Academy for close to $100,000. So we saw an uptick for the current year. I think several of those have already gone and returned. So the data, I think, will look a little bit better for the end of year, but there's still a significant uptick. And we're now in the process of trying to determine, is that based on last year? Is there concern building? Because school choice is something we can't control. We don't have the ability to say no. If a surrounding district accepts their child, we have no option to say no. We just get the bill for $5,000. So just to make sure that was clear, because it has been. I mean, it's been a source of pride for me because we worked hard at it. But it was disappointing this year to see that this is the first time in over 12 years that we've gone the wrong way and have actually seen that graph change.
This tech school, where is it?
It's
online.
It's online. It's a virtual
It's
school.
virtual school.
So it's the Tech Connections Academy. So it's a full school district. They have a superintendent. They have teachers and principals. It's the fastest growing school in Massachusetts, and it's school choice, but they get an extra $3,000 per student. So
Where is it based?
it is based in, I was going to say Marlborough, but it's not Marlborough. It's in center of the state.
Okay.
There's another one out in Western Mass too, the Greenfield Virtual
Green-
Academy.
Why do they get an extra
And UMass is
$3,000?
going to do this too.
I never heard of that.
UMass, they're doing international college. Yeah, they're doing a national.
They're doing a similar to Southern New Hampshire.
Yeah, so an online university. And it is absolutely the way. We have to be ready for this because this is TECA and Greenfield are the only two in Massachusetts currently, but there will absolutely likely be more. So when we say to a parent, if a student has been school avoidant and this is the best solution, that's easy, right? We know that's coming. We say that's cheaper than an out-of-district placement or anything. But when parents can just say, "Ooh, I think this looks great for my child," we have no way to say no. So why do they get more money, Peter? I haven't figured that out. It's an additional. The base rate is about $2,800 higher, and then there's a tech fee of about $80. So, as with the state, it just happens.
So they just stay home and do it, right?
And again, I've not experienced it from the user end, but my understanding is it's rigorous, it's engaging. You know, you'll get a high school diploma at the end of 12 years.
Well,
but-
I tech things are not really my thing, but my grandson lives with me, and of all things, he's studying Gaelic.
Okay.
Every Thursday night on the computer with a group of other students,
Really?
and they're comparing and
love
talking
it.
to each other and
Yeah.
everything, and I'm just sitting there fascinated.
Yes.
Because
So I firmly believe technology as an aid to
Yeah.
education is something we have to embrace and is powerful and
Yeah.
good. Replacing the educational experience with a sitting behind the screen, I just think that's bad for us as a society.
Yeah.
Because we have to learn to interact with people and play nice in the sandbox, and you learn that by having healthy debates with people and being there. So now to your question. So Larry, do you ask a question? So the special education position. So the positions that are so to the point, the discussion of why does it cost more to educate less students? So that is primarily about these specialists that you asked about. So
Well, I mean, what are
Right,
they
no, yeah.
doing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'll get there. So
okay.
we've lost close to 60 classroom teachers, traditional teacher in front of a class of 25 students, and we've replaced them with roughly 55, 58 other individuals. So there are instructional assistants. An instructional assistant in this district is only special education unless an IA is there's a 1-to-1 teacher IA ratio in preschool and in kindergarten, and that's for accreditation. So if you have a full-time kindergarten teacher, you've got a full-time aide. That person, that IA, is not dealing with special education IEPs. They're assisting a classroom teacher with a lot of you ever worked with kindergartners? It's beautiful. You need 2 adults with 28 kindergartners.
Time out for
right,
a
but
second
it-
so
but
I
it-
can translate for you.
Oh, am I using?
It's not a one-on-one basis then.
So,
An
so,
IA
right.
kind- yeah.
so that's just preschool and K. So there's 7, 9 of them across all 3 elementaries.
Right.
The bulk of those IAs are special education, and they're either providing a high level of support or 1-to-1. So a student who cannot succeed unless there is an adult assigned to them literally 1-to-1 all day. And again, that's a decision that's made by an IEP team, which is parents, educators, the principal.
Now, that person is in the same classroom as, we'll say, the other 19 children?
Sometimes.
Depends. So that's called inclusion. So there's an inclusionary settings. We also have substantially separate settings. So we keep talking about the ASD program at Newbury, so the Autism Spectrum Disorder program. Those students are they're included whenever they can, but struggle in a typical setting, so they spend a lot of their time in another classroom setting, small, separated, working with the teacher, hopefully working with peers whenever possible. So those students have a 1-to-1. And then there's also IAs who are providing a high level of service. So we have a special education teacher that's supporting 5th grade and 6th grade at Pine Grove School. That special education teacher then has 2 or 3 IAs over all those classrooms to support those students, because that teacher can't support 6 classrooms, 3 in 5th grade, 3 in 6th grade. So it's kind of like a physical therapy and a physical therapy assistant. So the physical therapist is the one who has to do the prescribing, the treating, the diagnosing, but then a PTA, physical therapy assistant, could carry out the therapies on a routine basis in the classroom.
Is it ever a distraction when you have these IAs that are when they integrate them in the classroom? Do you think that it's
Yes.
a distraction for the regular
Yes.
students? But I'm just wondering how that affects the learning for the. I mean, I'm not saying you have to. You want to put these other ones that are severe,
Yeah.
have problems and outcast them, but it must affect, the other
So,
students in the classroom too.
Yes, absolutely, and this, we could go through a whole lesson on special education. So, by Massachusetts law, we have to provide every student the least restrictive environment, that's the term. That LRE can look like many different things. But if a student is capable of being in a setting, in a classroom setting, that's where we want, with him or her, with their typical peers, functioning as best they can. Is it a distraction for those students? Probably at times. Is it a learning opportunity for those students? Absolutely. So I don't know, there's not many places in my life that I can kind of say, I want to work with just these people. I just want to work with Paul. I don't want to work with Narissa, right? So I have to work with everyone. So I think that's an important learning opportunity. But as far as the requirements, so first, back to the question, sorry. So so special educators, there's IAs, which there are 90 of them across the district. And then we have special education teachers. So that would be what you would traditionally know as a special education teacher. Their job is to write and manage an IEP. That could be academic goals, individual, that I use, I'm sorry, using I gave that like dollar acronym jar. So if a student is found to qualify for special education, they're written an individualized education plan, an IEP. That IEP is written by a team that consists of special educator, related therapies, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapist, generally younger kids, applied a behavioral specialist depending on the needs. It could be a literacy specialist. So all of those folks meet with parents, oftentimes with advocates, get around a table, develop that IEP. That IEP is then implemented by primarily the special education teacher and the classroom teacher.
Is this done during regular hours?
Depends.
Most
Okay.
routinely, yeah. Usually we'll call it before school to after school. They don't happen at 7 o'clock at night. Is that what you mean?
Okay.
So these are, and this is, anything I'm describing here, this is no different at Triton than it is anywhere else. There's certainly a debate.
No, I'm just trying to get a handle on why does it cost so much to have all of these people, and what are their functions?
Yep. So we've got IAs.
And we'll say if you have a classroom size of 20, but 3 of them are off with an IA, 4 of them are off with the math specialist, 2 of them are off with a reading assistant, your class size, dwindles down to, 3 or 4.
Yeah, no, there's never a class of 3 or 4.
Having 2 kids at Pine Grove, I can say that never happens.
That would be nice. No, so IAs are working with with in classrooms or assigned one-on-one. Special education teachers are in and out. There are some special ed teachers who are in a substantially separate classroom with severely disabled students. The rest of them, we have applied behavior analysts that deal with behaviors, specifically on the autism spectrum, but any of the social emotional disabilities, mental health disabilities. We have school social workers. Those are clinical social workers. That's not a case manager. That's supporting like a community service. This is a clinician. We have we have, I'm trying to think of what else we have. So those are primarily the special educators. We have psychologists, psychiatrists, clinical social workers, ABA specialists. You have BCBAs, which is a board certified behavior analyst. Those are all on the behavior and mental health side. And then reading and math specialists are not tied to special education. So reading and math specialists, we have roughly 1.5 at each of the elementary schools, and we have 1 at the middle school. And their job is really, ideally, what we would all like them to be is they are certified as a math specialist or a reading specialist, which is really, it's brain science at this point. Ultimately, they're working with teachers so that when I'm a teacher in a classroom and I've got 23 students sitting in front of me, I'm a better math teacher or I'm a better reading teacher for all 23 of my students. What's mostly happened now is that they're interventionists, so they're taking those small groups, 1 student, 3 students, 5 students, often in a classroom. So a teacher is working with a small group. Some students are working independently. The specialist would have a group of students because the requirement for us to get students to where they need to be and to compete with life and everything that is thrown at these kids. So it's not just kids who are coming from a bad house. Coming from, students coming from wealthy, supportive, wonderful families, students are still spending hours a day staring at their devices. So just the process of maintaining their attention is a challenge at times. So with all those distractions, the math and reading specialists are providing an intervention, hopefully early on. We've had this discussion so that by the time they get to the middle school, they don't need those interventions. So if we are able to intervene early, provide the services and the supports that they need, then by the time they get to middle school and beyond, they're at level, at par, at standard, and able to continue their progression. Once we get to the secondary level, obviously we have leveled classes. There's college prep, there's honors, AP, and things get a lot easier when you're departmentalized.
Brian, can I just stop you for a minute? I just want to put a sense of these specialists, math and reading specialists. These are not SPED or IAs or anything, but how many, so in Pine Grove, if we have 500 or 600 students over there, how many math and reading specialists do we have in the entire building?
It's 1.5. One reading.
1.5 persons.
Half math. Yeah.
People. Okay, so that's it for the whole building. I don't want you to get, Mr. White, the idea that there are all these reading specialists floating around from class to class.
No, I mean, I realize
1.5 people for the whole building.
and that
Same thing for Newbury Elementary,
It's for Pine
same
Grove.
thing for Salisbury.
For Salisbury, yes, and then
Similar
one
numbers.
at the middle school.
Okay.
So the reading and math specialists, call it 6 people, is a small portion
Right.
of those 57. Primarily the 50 some odd individuals are IAs. The biggest jump is mental health professionals. And we've been debating Chapter 70, and back in 1993 when they wrote this law in the early 90s, they had no clue. You couldn't even have forecasted what a classroom in 2019 would look like with the mental health crisis and opioid addiction. You wouldn't have guessed. So all of those numbers in the formula assume a fictitious classroom that we're trying to educate students within.
And let me just jump in also, these IEP team meetings, you have 8 or 9 people around the table dealing with one child. You have a principal, you have guidance, you have, this classroom teacher, you have all these other peoples. When that classroom teacher's at an IEP meeting, they're not in the classroom.
right.
Okay? And that's where somebody else is pulling the weight. The IA that's in the classroom may be assigned to a child or a group of children that's not a one-on-one. So I want you to understand that the IEP requirements, which are mandated by law, whenever a child can't get access to the curriculum, right? That's the standard. We have to give them access to the curriculum. If it's determined medically that they can't, then we have to form that team. Okay, and we have to address that child's needs. And I think 99% of the time it's done during school hours. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but you don't go to IEP meetings at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
They happen, but it's routinely during the school day. Or right after school, right? So it's at the very end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, if there's some crazy situation, they may try to convene it to accommodate somebody's schedule, but the majority of these meetings are done during school hours.
Yeah.
And so I just want you to understand the tax that puts on the entire system, every classroom teacher that has to go out and attend a meeting, because that classroom teacher has the best input, probably one of the best sources of input about that child, because they're with the child every day.
Unequivocally.
And these specialists are all based on the state mandates, is that correct? It's not like Triton does this differently than Pentucket.
So again, math and reading, we have less than a lot of other districts, but
Yeah.
that is something where we're trying to meet the needs of a larger group. Anything on the special education side is absolutely state
That leads to,
federally required.
what's the Triton budget roughly now? Is 40 million, am I correct? Let's say
42 for the projected FY20.
Okay, 25 years ago, I had 3 kids in the system, in Triton. And I remember very vividly, we were partially regionalized. And the state was really encouraging all the towns in the state to, they were giving us carrots to completely regionalize. We've voted on it. I remember it was a big thing.
Yeah.
And at the time, the state was coming through with 1/3 of the school budget. So today's dollars, 42 million, that would be $14 million that they would be giving, the state would be providing to the Triton district. Instead, it's around 21%. Is that correct? Roughly a little more than 8 million.
In the tentative budget,
So you're looking
it's
at a difference of about
20.6%.
$6 million
Yeah.
that if the state was coming through like it did and promised us
Yeah.
25 or so years ago, I don't think the funding, school funding would be an issue like it is today.
Unequivocally.
And you folks would have all the enrichment programs that you probably would want.
Family wouldn't have to pay
And you wouldn't be cutting
$1,300
out
to
on
pay 3 seasons.
busing and all that, and we wouldn't be every year encountering these issues. And that's what we really do struggle, because other than the school budget, then we're looking at all the budgets,
Mm-hmm.
and they're always cutting and squeezing and squeezing. And I don't want to say that we feel it's the schools that are taking that away from, but it kind of gives that sense to
Absolutely.
folks in the other budget. But I can
Yeah.
see if the state is really,
Yeah.
if they came through like
Yeah.
promised,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have these issues.
I completely agree, and I think that same tension or that fight,
Yeah.
I don't want to call it a fight, but that same tension exists even within the schools, because you have families of students who are achieving at very high levels, and there used to be opportunities for them, and to excel and enrichment and more opportunities and more AP. That we're not able to provide, because we don't have to provide that by law. We do have to provide special education services by law. So we said that this morning, that literally it's forcing that same tension even within schools, where the mandate of special education, again, needed, deserved, must have, but the state's failure to fund that portion is driving out and drying up the rest of the opportunities for kids. Yeah.
Which doesn't solve our problem, though, because if we're not getting the money, it really does come out of other
Yeah.
budgets
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
town.
The burden is absolutely fallen on the town. And I feel like a lot of what the committee has done over the past few years, I fully hear that it's a lot more than is
You see both sides.
reliably affordable. But I also know that what we're doing is a lot of cost avoidance. If we didn't provide the special education services, we're going to get sued,
Right.
and we're probably going to have to pay that anyway. If we cut to an extreme degree, we're going to have students going out to school choice and going out to the charter schools, where we have no control over that spending at that point. If a student goes out on school choice and happens to need special education services, the school that they're in makes that decision. We sit at the table.
We pay the bill.
Yep, we pay the bill. So a lot of what I feel like we've done in the past few years is tried to minimize the cost impacts the best that we can.
But it's that lack of control. Even healthcare, we're negotiating healthcare now. There's some level of control, right? Everyone sees rates go through the roof because it's the cost of healthcare, but there's some level of control. Special ed really is that the one thing that we literally have no way to predict and no way to control. We had a student move into the district, $119,000, just like that. Boom. All of a sudden, it's our bill. So it's not one of those things where we get to have a say. It's all of a sudden the bills say 112 Elm Street, Byfield, Massachusetts, and we're obligated to pay. So just that. I'm sorry, I forget who mentioned it. You were mentioning that this chart is that chart. So 2002, if you look on the other side, the data, 2002, we were getting $8.871 million in Chapter 70. In 2019, we're getting 8.708. If you look a little calculated down the bottom, if we just increased for inflation, we'd be getting almost $12.6 million. So in fiscal 19, dollar for dollar, not adjusted, we're getting 163,000 less than we did in 2002, 17 years ago. And this
It
chart
also says is that the state are level funding, but because the percentage is going down, it's because your expenses are going up.
Right. Yeah. So on average, we're 2 to 2.1% increase per year over the years. But if you look at that, where the state paid 60%, the states now, I'm sorry, where the towns were paying 60%, the towns are now paying 76%. In the tentative budget, where that lands, that goes to 77%. So it's continuing, as I think you just said, it's continuing to push it to the towns. And I get that. I mean, it's a failure of the state. Our challenge is to figure out how to not drown the towns, but still provide an excellent education for your students.
this is probably a dumb question, but why don't these add up to 100? You have 60 and 34,
Yep.
94.
So look at the note on the
Am I
bottom.
missing something? Okay. Other revenue.
You got it, it's right here.
It's in the bottom of the graph, yeah. So there's other revenue. So other revenues include excess and deficiency. At some points in certain years, there was, so it's Medicaid, interest revenue, and
Title I.
Okay.
Title I's not in there, that's in grants. There's been others, sometimes healthcare, retiree healthcare was included as a revenue, but it's not one of the major. You know, the major revenues are Chapter 70, regional transportation, and then town assessments. So, and you can see, and then the adjusted FY19, it's actually, you know, other revenues is down to 250,000. So all of those other pots of money have dried up too. I mean, at one point, 5 years ago, we had a lot more choice coming in. Again, we want to keep that ratio. We don't want to falsely inflate our numbers as well. So we don't want to just, there are districts who have just continued to accept school choice. And then that changes, just natural attrition, and all of a sudden you're left with a $500,000 deficit.
Aren't the regional districts working, trying to group together to work for, because I thought I saw something, Narissa, on social media.
She's not doing much. She's just kind
No,
of like,
she's,
it's like,
no, I want to say,
I'm kidding.
I'm on social media, and Narissa does a terrific job
does.
of explaining. She doesn't get emotional
Yep.
with her information.
Yep.
She tries to be as factual as she
Yep.
can. And as a voter and citizen, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Because she's educating us. And again, she tries not to be biased. I don't sense that. I think she tries to be fair.
So
and that's
I'll tell you this,
important.
but she won't tell you. So I was at a legislative, when was that? Month's Friday, at a was that Friday?
Yeah.
At a legislative breakfast out in Western Mass. And so this was the Mass Association of Regional Schools. So this was school committee members, legislators, again, not a lot of big names, mostly aides showed up. But there was a group of superintendents to my left. I knew several of them. And people were asking kind of softball questions. You know, what are we going to do about this? And Narissa gets up and starts quoting, how about this bill in this chapter? And it was just blank thought bubbles over all of the, you know, legislators and their aides. And all the superintendents, they were like, oh my gosh, who's that? And I'm like, he's the chair of the school committee. So it is not the norm that people get this involved, but absolutely there's a regional effort, and there's momentum. There's momentum where there has never been before.
But when you add it all up, just the same though, you've got all these small towns that could group together, but when you're against the Bostons and the Springfields and Worcesters and
Yeah.
all that, where the big population growth are, and where they have more representatives, it just, we're so outnumbered.
Yep.
It's a real challenge,
It is.
you know, to get the ear of the leaders.
It is, and we have local legislators who are very responsive. They don't have a real strong voice.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not a voice, but they don't have a real strong
Clout.
pull on Beacon Hill. There's a superintendent's legislative lunch next Friday, and we combined about 13 North Shore towns to create Tar Town, we're calling it. And Bruce Tar is the captain of the town. So just to put all of our collective, all of our enrollment statistics, all of the special ed statistics, and when you see that as a large district, all of a sudden you realize, wow, this really is a huge need when you put all of these little communities together and group them like a Springfield or a Lowell. So there's momentum, there's movement, there's more understanding. There's still a long way to go.
Yep. And I will say, the one place that we are strong is in the Senate. About 22 to 23 of the senators, depending on how they district it, have regional school districts in their legislative districts. So one of the keys has been trying to make sure that we have a really strong voice in those regional school districts, at least one of those regional school districts in each legislative district, so that they can go to their senators, since the Senate has the last vote on the budget prior to going to conference committee. They can field their own bills and make sure that we're well represented there. When you have the 160 representatives, we have far less. I think it's 58, something like that.
Yeah.
But we can be effective in the Senate, and that's where we've kind of put our focus.
On the students that go to the internet school, are they?
I wouldn't call it an internet school, but in Larry's words, it's officially the Internet Academy. Yes.
Wait until
Well,
you tell their
I was
superintendent.
gonna say, his name is Adam Goldberg, I'm gonna tell him it's the internet.
I'll call it what it is until they come up with something better. Are you being charged if they are special needs or?
Yes. It's called the special ed increment. So if we choiced a student into Triton, and then, so just to confirm, that's a blind process. So when someone fills out an application, we know nothing. By law, we can know nothing. If we have a seat and 2 students, it's a blind lottery. If we pull a student that has massive special needs and massive programming, we're then obligated that student is with us through graduation or age 22. So if we have a student who comes in, there's a process called special ed increment. So we're going to get the $5,000 if we accepted that student from the other district. But then we also get, just a formula. So if we're providing this level of services, OTs, PTs, JVA services, there's a form that's submitted to the state, and we get that money back as well. So for a student who comes in with disabilities, rather than $5,000, and so if we took them from Newburyport, we might get $17,950 if the sped increment gives us that additional $12,950.
But if he decided to get his education online,
Then the same way. So it'll come through the Tech Academy. Yep. And they have to provide, but yeah. And then
We get the bill.
but we get the bill.
Yep. And along that line too, we use a lot of online services as well, separate contracted, to be able to get to students who can't actually attend our school because we're still responsible for educating those students. So hospital tutoring, online systems for students who are at home for whatever reason, those are also considered special education services that we as a district are obligated to provide.
Yeah, no, there are absolutely students who belong there. It is a good thing for them.
right?
They're supported well, their families involved and invested. There are a lot of students who I know, the high school guides, that they're just like chomping at the bit to try and get these kids back because they're just like, oh my gosh, we can get you across the finish line. So, but we have second graders there.
I noticed in your one of your reports, this is the disability codes, and it goes back from 2013 all the way up to 2019. Lists all the different disabilities or things like that. I just want to get your comment about back in 2013, it was 14.9% of the students had these disabilities.
Total, right?
Total.
Yeah.
And now it's up to 19.6%.
And of a smaller cohort too.
Hmm?
It's of a smaller cohort, so it's a much higher actual number because that's a percentage of our enrollment, right? So the enrollment has actually shrunk. So there's actually even more special education students than you would think there is.
The number is
That's even worse then.
The number is ticked up for
That's saying that as they're, I'm not going to blame the school for it because I'm sure that there are other factors at home and stuff like that. But as the student progresses through Triton, they're getting worse. They're developing problems.
No, because that's not assuming someone's coming in as a preschooler and then developing the problem in 9th grade. As students are coming in, are more students qualifying for special education? Absolutely.
There's higher rates of autism out there. There are students, I was just talking about this with Senator DeZoglio, that's the meeting I came from when I was on my way here. There are students that if they were born as an infant back in 2002 or whatever it was, at 22 and a half weeks, there was minimum aid given and that was kind of it. Now there are significant efforts made to keep those infants alive. And unfortunately, some of these students are in a wheelchair with a tracheotomy, and we're caring for them in our district. So part of it's just medical advances that allow students to live that wouldn't necessarily have lived 20 years ago.
Unless it's a visible disability, you know, somebody's in a wheelchair and stuff. who determines if a child with special needs, does a parent request it, or do the teachers determine it and put them in that category?
It can go either way. Yeah, it can be initiated from either side.
Because my wife, she's a retired high school teacher in another community, and she said that in her school, in her high school, there were parents that sometimes asked to have their kids classified because they said they had the special needs classes had more materials available because of the funding and all that. And I don't know how that is for Triton,
Yeah.
but when you have people clamoring to get into that, and it puts the numbers up, that's where
Yeah.
it costs a lot more though for the special needs.
Yeah, they can request to have them evaluated, and I think that's where the key is in that evaluation process, right? Because that's where you're truly determining what a student needs, and then that's getting written into the individualized education plan that Brian talked about, so that you know exactly what that student needs moving forward. And sometimes it's when they're on a math test, they have multiplication tables right there in front of them because that's something that they struggle with. Sometimes it's a one-on-one aid. Sometimes it's sound dampening stuff in the classrooms because they have difficulty hearing and they need that. And maybe some of the students actually, the teachers will wear a lanyard with a microphone on it to amplify their voices because students can struggle with sound.
Which every classroom at Pine Grove has now.
Will now have,
All
yes.
Bluetooth, it's unbelievable. But that's so I don't have the exact statistic, but it can happen both ways. So ideally, a teacher understands and realizes the problem, moves the students, we call an IST process, an instructional support team, review, make other attempts to provide remediation and intervention, and then fully evaluate the student. The other course is a parent requests. If a parent requests, by law, we have to complete the full evaluation. Extensive evaluation. It's something like 1 out of 5 times, 6 times that a student who was referred by a parent actually qualifies for special education. So it's far less frequent. But it is the team, so it's that entire team that makes the determination. So if there was a neuropsych evaluation, we would have our psychiatrist do the neuropsych evaluation. They would likely be academic testing, the WISC and Woodcock. That would be done by the special ed teacher. If there was a speech or PT or occupational therapy concern, each of those professionals has a component for the assessment. The team then meets. All the professionals provide their reports, and then the team determines. You could have a disability, so you could have a disability and be on a 504 plan. Just because you have a disability doesn't mean you need a 504 plan. The 504 plan kicks in, which is that's with Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. So a 504 plan is only required if your disability impacts your ability to conduct a major life function. So in our case, it's learning. So similar with an IEP, you can have a disability, and if it doesn't manifest in challenges to a student's learning or basic life functions, they wouldn't necessarily qualify for an IEP. So it is that team that makes the determination. But once that team makes the determination, by law, I even can't overrule that.
Right, but the only thing I would add in though is once the team makes the determination, the parents still have the right to take an appeal from that.
Right, so the parent's part of the team, and then they can reject the IEP, and it can go on, as it routinely does. Not routinely. The majority of IEPs and students are receiving services, and the process functions well. But there is, a large subset of parents who hire advocates and attorneys, and they fight us, and we lose the battle. We try, we get to the point, and literally we wait. Mary Ellen Sawarda is our attorney, Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, Lehane in Boston. She's kind of the gold standard of special education attorneys, and when she says, you're going to pay me more to fight this and you're going to lose, that's when we say, okay, let's settle. So it's...
Do you think we're getting more disabled children? General question. Or are we just identifying them better, easier in some way?
I think it depends. So I think with general academic disabilities, so a true learning disability, I think we're pretty much the same. I think any mental health, social and emotional disabilities, I think we're identifying them better. I think mental health, it wasn't spoken about 20 years ago. 10 years ago, it wasn't believed to be something substantial. Now I think we're at about 50-50, where people think it's a crock, or at least we're getting more people that believe mental health is a real problem. So I think mental health is truly, we're better diagnosing. I don't know that we have a worse mental health situation. Maybe we do. Something like autism, I forget the exact statistic, but it was something, 20 years ago, it was something like 1 in 10,000, and now it's 1 in 60 students is diagnosed with autism. So something like that, unequivocally, the data is there to show that it's actually a disability.
A lot of that is because they're, more proactive as far as putting people in. I mean, like, there could be a kid that, when I was going to school, they would say, well, this kid's a troublemaker, he's disruptive, and now they're going to say, well, there must be something wrong with him or something like that, and he's going to be classified.
No,
So, I mean,
no, I think, when you see a student who's diagnosed correctly, it's not just a disruptive student.
So
there is.
why the change dramatically in the last, 10, 15, 20 years, and, the number of autisms.
I don't know the answer. I think clearly there's something. People will say vaccinations, there's all these theories. There's something, because this, if you've worked with someone on the autism spectrum, it's unequivocal, right? We see it. It's not. They don't do it by choice. So it's happening, and it's happening more. We're seeing this more and more and more. So what is causing that? I'm certainly not a doctor, nor do I intend or desire to be. But
this peanut butter allergy and stuff, people didn't have.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of
like that.
We don't talk about allergies anymore. Yeah, but life-threatening allergies, we've kind of just kind of sanitized things, and the issue, it's really a non-issue, right? We don't have to talk about it much, because we just say, you know what, we can do sun butter. It almost tastes like peanut butter with sunflower seeds in the cafeteria. So yeah. But it's so to answer the question, I think it's both. It's both. Yeah.
And I actually, in my previous meeting, actually sat with Ronnie Ray Parrott, who chairs the Salisbury Board of Selectmen, who also happens to work in actually does admittances in one of the schools that we send students to out of district. And one of the things that she said before, and she said it again tonight, was that that students very early on, in a lot of cases before they even get to our schools, are not getting the coping skills, and they're not getting the social skills that they had gotten in the past. And she said part of that is just the way our culture has changed, but part of that too, which is to a degree, I wouldn't say it's on us, but it's on the state, is pushing the academics down into the early grades. As she said, her job was to take a nap and play when she was in kindergarten. And now students are expected to come out of kindergarten reading and being able to count to 100. And that wasn't something that was necessarily done. Even, what was it? Those came in 2002, I think, a lot of them. So it's really been around for about 15 years.
I think the state system has focused on accountability, and pushing the solution to the problem is pushing more academics and at an earlier age. Whereas my personal belief, and I think we have a state commissioner of education who believes this as well, it's about the entire educational experience. And students will perform well, not just by drill and kill and making sure you can read by the time you come into kindergarten, but by developing the whole child, so that it's a positive experience, and it's not where students don't dread going to school, but they actually enjoy it. And that's not to say every kid wants to be at school, but if everything we do is engaging, the drill and kill academics is not the way. My personal belief is not the way to necessarily produce the best results. We produce robots.
Yeah, when I have young students, and when Ivor came in last year and said to Brian, I'm sending my youngest to half-day kindergarten, and he said, you cannot fit all the required academics in a half a day.
Yep.
I thought, well, that's a problem now, isn't it?
Yep.
And I had a half-dayer and a full-timer. I have 2 kids, and they're just very different kiddos, and so both the options. But yeah, the demands are changing.
And I remember when there wasn't kindergarten.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
When my son Mark went to school, they didn't have kindergarten.
Yep. Yeah, it's a very, very different world. It's different from when I was a child. It's very different, obviously, from when my parents were children. I can say one of the reasons my mom taught K through 3, and one of the reasons that she left teaching and actually flipped to the opposite side, she went and taught kindergarten enrichment because she felt like she could provide those social skills a lot better because the kids weren't getting it in the classroom anymore. So she left the drill and kill environment and went to provide the other part of it because she was so upset with the way the change went.
Yeah, 20 years ago when I was a 3rd and 4th grade teacher at Pine Grove School, it's not even recognizable what my job was versus what a 4th grade teacher's is today. Virtually unrecognizable.
Now let's try to wrap things up.
Sorry.
I didn't want to go
And in
into my
summary.
childhood, okay?
Sorry, Larry.
That's why I'm no dummy.
Come on, I want to hear about your childhood. Tell me, Larry, do you have...
Okay, Larry, you mean you don't want to hear how I was in the last class to have their 8th grade graduation upstairs?
Were you really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
1955,
Wow.
just before Pine Grove opened.
Go figure.
Okay, any other questions, comments, or anything? Just kind of in summary, I know you've got, your budget presentations and stuff like that, and I implore you to consider the towns. You report to the towns, and I know it's a difficult job, but we can't keep affording these increases. And I know that, the next thing that's coming along is the vaping. We've got the opioid crisis. We've got every excuse possible. But please consider the towns. And I thank you for your time.
Can I just respond to that real quick?
Sure.
In my opinion, we're considering the towns the best that we can because we can't afford to have $200,000 more of school choice tuitions increases every year. We can't go back in that direction. Everything I think that we have in here is trying to avoid additional costs down the road. We're doing the best we can to put the brakes on, and unfortunately that means pushing boundaries right now.
So how do we kick it up a notch?
We need the state to kick in money.
Beyond you.
That was the
It's the
thing.
state.
Yeah.
What's your plan?
I think it needs to be collective. So, we're working, the committee, and we're spending a ton of time with Mass Association of Superintendents, which is my organization, MASC, MARS. I think it's got to be that collective effort.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always been the schools, right? So we can only create so much noise. But if town boards, finance committees, and select boards are getting involved at the state level, and putting pressure, sitting with someone from Newbury who's a lifelong supporter of Bruce Tarr and saying, look, you've got to figure this out or I can't support you anymore. So, we've got to get to that point. And again, our 5 and Diana DeZoglio, I think, will step in and fill Katie O'Connor-Ives' shoes very well. But we've got 5 people who are ready and willing to listen. And again, they don't have power seats at the table. But we've got some people that can make a stink. And we all collectively, if it's the town officials against the school committee and the superintendent, that doesn't play well. It's got to be us fighting straight into Boston. In the traditional, we were saying that today, the traditional, day on the hill from MASC, that's not, we've got to find a way to put pressure and make them uncomfortable and make them say yes.
Yeah,
So-
as long as it's you versus us, we've both lost.
Exactly. Well said, Larry. Well said. And I think, one of the efforts, certainly there's there's movement on Chapter 70. And the big push that we keep saying now is don't rush this because all of the bills that are on the table right now in the legislature give Triton peanuts more. Literally.
Or less.
Or less.
Yep.
Keep your money. What we need is to slow that down and say, okay, we've been now 26 years, we've been saying 25 years for over a year now. We're now in 26 years since ed reform. We need to do this right once. So we need another 25-year solution. So don't just blindly, there are select boards and school committees just blindly saying, we support Senator Chang Diaz's Promise Act. We get nothing from that. And that would then be seen as ed reform, and we're stuck with this for 25 years. So our message has been, keep going on that. I feel like there's been some movement to say, okay, we get it, we're hearing. And then the second piece, and this has been my mantra, is special education is the unifier for all cities and towns, 351 communities across this Commonwealth. There's no one who's not dealing with special education costs. People are dealing with the medical, with the social and emotional and mental health, general academic, autism spectrum, out-of-district placement, special education, transportation. Again, all necessary, but the state needs some skin in the game with some kind of financial commitment. So that's our push, is let's keep going with Chapter 70, but let's do something different with special education that's out of that formula. We have Circuit Breaker. If we fully fund Circuit Breaker, we get an extra 30 grand. That doesn't help our $1.1 million special education bill. Give us some real money there and fix Chapter 70. So I will say this, over the last year and a half, there's been more momentum than I've ever seen in my time. So I'm
What
hopeful.
bothers me is if we're struggling with budgets in very prosperous times,
Yeah.
we have a boom economy. I mean, look
Absolutely.
at the shortage of jobs. But if we're struggling in these times, what happens when we go in the next downturn? And it will come.
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely.
Because we've gone through these
Yep,
cycles.
absolutely.
And when we get into a bus cycle, it says, wow, what do we really do then?
Right, yeah,
You
absolutely.
can't get the money out of the state now.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think they're looking for alternative forms of revenue,
Yeah.
and I think that's been one of the key things, is that they don't want to do reform without being able to attach a revenue stream to it, and that's part of what's held it back so far. The millionaire's tax getting shot down last year, basically, it didn't close that door, but it stopped it for at least last year. They're looking at reintroducing that legislatively this year in the hopes of getting by the constitutional issues that they had last year and putting it in as a straight legislative process, no ballot question. According to all the news articles I've read, that could yield a significant amount of revenue. There's obviously marijuana that's coming in more and more significantly into the state. That could yield revenues. There's new avenues that they can explore or continue to explore, depending on what rate it's at. And then the key thing is that they need to earmark that funding stream, or a certain percentage of that funding stream, for education. So this can't be, we have 3 new revenue streams. It has to be, we have this revenue stream, it's projected to bring in this amount of money, and 73% of that is going to go to education, 22% is going to go to transportation, however they want to divide that up, but it needs to be a guaranteed kitty, so to speak.
It sounds great, but we're looking at budgets based on meals tax and hotel taxes. We're at the top of the curve.
But the state is
You know,
different.
in 2 years' time, that's probably going to dip down.
Yep, yep.
But the state is different. I mean, this would be state level monies that they're looking for.
Well, and it's not just dumping in. So there's $200 million new in the governor's budget for Chapter 70, and we're getting $46,300.
Yeah.
So the problem is, okay, it needs to be this concurrent searching for new revenues. But as you're finding them, don't just dump them into the broken formula, or we're just going to get pittance. So I mean, the state could spend $1 billion new, and we'll get 20, 30 extra grand a year.
Yeah, but then you're talking about winners and losers, because if we
Right.
get more, they get less. So then it becomes all politics about who
Yeah.
has the bigger
Yeah.
voice, and that's
Right. So we're a hold harmless district. So if we got what the formula said we should get, we would get $4 million less than we're getting right now. So we are all 3 communities are considered high wealth. Because it's aggregate wealth. It's literally a sum of all the wealth in town for residents, not a median, aggregate sum. So you have a few wealthy individuals. You have
Who's the billionaire?
They literally had
so this was Roger Hatch. I was meeting with Roger Hatch and Neil Harrington, and Roger Hatch was one of the former DESI, was one of the writers of the formula, and he said there was 1 year that a town had a minimum local contribution increased by 14%. Because an individual sold his or her business. And that went on to the wealth calculation for that year. So I said, I'm like, how is that okay? Like, you can't have a formula that one individual choice can affect a community like that.
That's crazy.
It's the best we could do. So, and that's when I showed Roger that we actually are getting less now than we were in 2002. He's like, not less dollar for dollar. I'm like, no, Roger, look it up. And he looked up. He goes, oh my gosh, I've never seen that. So these are people who, again, well intended. The formula does not do what they intended it to do. So.
And I will say that's a piece of it is people not understanding how it works. So I don't want to pat Brian and I on the back too much, but I think we're somewhat rabble rousers up in this corner of the of the state. We're trying to make sure that people who don't understand how the formula works will understand how the formula works. And to your point, Peter, there's a certain when an urban district can have 35 kids in a classroom, there's a certain shame, I think, in saying we need money too. And we're trying to say, and trying to make it okay to say, we're advocating for our districts. Our districts are in trouble too. You're going to put in money so that their 34 students in a classroom is going to drop down to maybe 18 or whatever students in the classroom. But in the meantime, our classroom sizes are going to continue to rise. Our programs are going to continue to cut, and we need to advocate for us now, even if it seems like the wrong thing to do or a shameful thing to do. We have to advocate for our own districts.
It seems so arbitrary, though. Like what was the discussion you had before? We talked about Georgetown, how they were 1 year before us, and they got
Pentucket gets
yeah,
$5 million more in
$5
state
million,
aid.
and they're not. I would compare us.
Socioeconomic, they're pretty. You match up the three towns, similar, not exact, but a lot more similar than 50% more aid. Yeah, they're getting 13 million and change. And it was the incentive in 94 was better than the incentive in 95, which is typical. The state says, oh, we have money, incentivize regionalization. And once you lock in, we're still getting that regional incentive aid. But it was big in 2003, a little less in 2004 when Pentucket did, a little less in 2005 when Triton pulled the trigger. So it's, it's a completely arbitrary and unfair formula, which is why I get in trouble putting out a listserv saying, don't fix it. Or don't fund it, fix it. So there are people who vehemently disagree with us. Not a regular
Say the
basis.
same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much.
Anytime. Happy to be here.
Appreciate your coming by and
Yes,
helping
thank
us
you.
out. And we'll see you in a couple of days or tomorrow.
We'll be there. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
For coming.
Nice to meet you. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
See you on Warehouse Lane.
Absolutely. I was
Okay.
actually just doing the numbers on Warehouse Lane the other day because I thought this was interesting what Brian had told me. And so the house at the end of the street sold for $950,000.
Yes.
And that was the highest of the last 5 sales on Warehouse Lane.
Yeah.
The next lowest one was $445,000. All the other ones were below $400,000. So when you look at aggregate wealth, that and the aggregate real estate value, that house is
It
basically
doesn't-
worth
they
2 to
don't-
3 houses.
They don't count what I paid for my house, do they? No.
I don't think so.
No, it's the value. That's the.
It's what it's worth now.
No, yeah,
It's
it's
like
not
Salisbury.
worth 12.5 anymore.
Salisbury has these $1 million homes probably weighing a lot, but then you got these really like $200,000 homes too, like the big
Absolutely.
disparity
Yeah.
in Salisbury,
Yeah. Newbury has the same thing with Plum Island. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, it is what it is, I guess. But anyway, thank you.
Let's continue on with our meeting. Item 4, review February 26 minutes.
They looked fine to me. I did not see anything.
Yeah, they look fine to me.
I didn't see any errors, typos.
Okay,
anything, so I make
how about a motion?
Yeah.
Make a motion?
Second by Sharon. Any other discussion?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We don't have anything new on the accounting report.
No.
And we have our
And
dates.
we have our
also.
dates,
It's all set.
so-
Dates.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay.
Oh, Bernie would like to say something.
Hi, Freddie.
I was just wondering, the process now for scheduling a review of the water department's budget?
That would go through Debbie,
Okay, so you,
because they would see the water department budget first, and then we would see it after that.
So is there a rough kind of like time window when you want to see it by, so I can back plan, because I'm responsible,
Is your budget ready?
almost.
We're meeting every week this
Every
month
week.
now, because this is the
Yeah.
real crunch.
So-
Because, yeah,
So my board won't be able to pass our budget, vote on our budget until 2 weeks.
Okay.
We have to go to the selectmen.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can go to the
Tuesday,
selectmen
that's
like
it.
Monday and then come here Tuesday, that type of thing.
because by early April, we should have reviewed all the budgets, because then they've got to get the articles and everything ready. They've got to be mailed out 2 weeks, is it right? Before
Right.
town meeting, which is in early May.
So essentially, we've got to get all this done before the end of this month.
Yes,
Yes. yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
that's what we're working
This is
towards.
our real crunch time now.
And you can see if our agenda is there, we didn't have too many tonight to start with, so we're waiting for them to start coming
Yeah,
in.
there's, I don't know, 80 budget, not 80, 40,
Yeah,
whatever. Okay, I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay.
We meet next Tuesday?
yes,
Yes.
every
Okay.
Tuesday for
Every
this
week.
month.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.